Ah, the open work plan. Some people love it, some people despise it, and some people are so sick of talking about it that they create an entire 20-minute video about it. But there's a reason that the open office is such a hot topic. Around 70% of US companies currently adopt some version of the open office layout, with minimal partitions and cubicles. And about 15 to 20% of companies have completely open plans, with rows of partitionless workstations in one large room. But who's actually right? Does the open office plan actually work, or is it just causing people frustration and distraction? The answer to that question and more in today's video, so stay tuned. Hello there, my name is Kelsey and I am the founder and creative director of KLSY Design Studio, a full-service interior design firm specializing in commercial spaces for small and boutique-style businesses. If you are new to our channel, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button for more interior design-related content. Follow us on Instagram and check out our website at www.klsy.design, where you can sign up for our email newsletter and gain access to our free designer cheat sheets. If I had a nickel for every time I heard someone complain about their open office plan, I wouldn't need to make monetizable video content at all. But I will admit I've spent nearly my entire career defending them because, well, that's what I've been taught. As designers, our essential job, as viewed by the client, is to fit as many people into a space as humanly possible, and legal by code, in an effort to reduce rent costs and get the most bang for their buck, while designing a space that is enjoyable to be in. This oftentimes mimics the Google office with bold colors and cool work lounges. So yeah, I just always kind of thought that the open plan worked because that's how we're still designing today. Until I actually started researching for this video, and boy, was I blindly walking through this topic. There are so many factors that contribute to a successful workplace, as well as many pros and cons to the open plan itself. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of what the studies say, let's cleanse our palates and look at a brief history of the modern workplace. The modern workplace, as we know it, began in the 1870s with the invention and mass production of the typewriter. Now having a machine that made it so much faster and easier to perform clerical work, people thought, hey, this is so easy, even a woman could do it. So they began hiring women for these secretarial jobs. Secretaries allowed men to work on business things. Sounds like that finance bro you went on a date with and he says he does business things and is a businessman. And with an increase in business, you need more employees. With an increase in workers in the workforce, much of it thanks to women, over time people started to be strapped for space and realized that the office model wasn't as efficient as it could be. In the early 1900s, Frank Lloyd Wright began designing some of the first modern open offices in America. Workers were relatively spread out on an open floor plan with managers and bosses in private glass offices in order to oversee the floor. In the 1950s, a concept known as Bürolandschaft was born in Germany. Yes, I had to practice that many times before filming this. Bürolandschaft. It was the concept of having an open plan workplace, free from partitions, just like what FLW was doing, but instead the goal was to create an open landscape vibe. It was laid out in a more organic way rather than inspired by a factory line like we have in America. America, always on brand. This concept sounded interesting to America, and FLW actually had a lot of those same concepts and ideas in his earlier designs. But with the continued increase of business and the need to fit more and more people into one space, workstations became smaller and more densely packed in an orderly fashion. To combat this, Herman Miller invented the Action Office in 1964. It was the original cubicle that presented the idea of a flexible combination of desks, tables, and walls. It referenced the concept of Bürolandschaft and was designed to enhance a person's freedom and increase privacy while maintaining floor plan flexibility. And people thought, yeah, that's so great, we love this. However, we still need to jam as many people as possible in here in order to decrease our cost per square foot. So the beautiful and innovative Action Office became the modern cubicle we know and hate today. A sad, usually gray box with high walls that suck the life out of any office. The 1970s was the height of the cubicle. During this time, people recall feeling isolated in their boxes and like they were back to that factory line office model. It also increased the gap in hierarchy between the workers and their bosses. Sitting in cushy private corner offices, there's no worse feeling than clearly seeing you're just one small cog in a cookie cutter machine. And that office model remained for a while until the 80s and 90s, when teleworking made its debut. Although not accessible to the masses just yet, the invention of the personal computer allowed some companies to experiment with the idea of giving their employees more flexibility when it came to their work setup. With the rise of the tech industry as we know it, startups and innovative companies like Google began experimenting with new ways in which they could attract and retain the best of the best talent. They tore down those walls of the cubicle to bring more light and fun into the space, and the goal was to increase collaboration and visibility in the workplace. They also added those famous amenities. I'm sure you're all familiar with the foosball nap pod meditation room strategy, and it wasn't at all in an effort to force their employees to work harder and literally never go home. And then that leaves where we are today, a post-COVID world with technology so advanced that we don't even really need an office at all, and still arguing over what office plan and strategy is really the best, if any. Now that we know where this whole open office concept started and how we got to where we are now, let's look at some of the pros and cons of the open office today and what the studies show. Let's start with the pros, on a good note. The first pro that I mentioned a few times already is that the open office plan is cost effective. This is really only a pro for the business owners and not so much for the workers themselves, but the business owners are the ones paying for the office and the design of it, so it's still important to mention. Less offices means more room for workstations, which means more people can fit into a smaller space, which ultimately means that you are getting a higher return on investment per square foot. Although hierarchy ultimately depends on the company structure and how the people at the top foster culture, the open office plan can be a great way to reduce hierarchy in an office by bringing managers and leadership out of their offices and working alongside their employees in the open. If everyone has the same desk with the same amount of space, it creates equity among workers at all levels. What I've seen is pretty popular across the board is that CEOs and partners at the very top of the chain will still have private offices, as well as people whose jobs include discussing confidential information such as HR, but department leaders and middle managers will all be out in the open with the rest of the team. It makes these people more accessible and allows employees to feel comfortable walking up to their manager's desk to talk to them, rather than the intimidation of walking into their office. On the same brainwave, having everyone out in the open office can help foster community among team members. A great design strategy to promote this is planning workstations in clusters or neighborhoods. Co-locating members on the same team will encourage them to collaborate more and make them more easily accessible when working on projects together. Now for the cons. I'm sure everyone's most excited to hear these. The first con is surprising, to say the least, even for me when I read about it: decreased collaboration. Collaboration is often the argument when promoting an open office plan, and it makes sense. Having everyone working out in the open together will theoretically increase spontaneous bump-ins and conversations, therefore increasing collaboration. However, the research actually shows the opposite. The open plan doesn't necessarily increase or promote collaboration. Of course, if someone decided to interact with a nearby coworker, they could do so, but they also can make the decision to simply not interact with anyone at all by putting on their headphones or not making eye contact, or spontaneously getting up to go to the bathroom because you see the woman that you hate from the next studio over approaching you and you really don't want to have a conversation with her. According to Harvard Business Review, when the firm switched from private offices to open offices in this one study, face-to-face interactions fell by 70%. While electronic interactions increased to compensate for it. And a 2018 collaboration study showed that open architecture appeared to trigger a natural human response to socially withdraw from their office mates and communicate instead over email and instant messaging. One explanation for this could be French philosopher Denis Diderot? I think it's Diderot. If I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, don't come for me. Dennis's fourth wall theory. People create an imaginary fourth wall to prevent being distracted from their work, much like a basketball player in a stadium or an actor on stage. The larger the audience, the more important the wall, which means if you are sitting in an open office that has a lot of people in it, you are more likely to create that fourth wall in order to not distract yourself and kind of create this little bubble for yourself, both for distraction and for privacy, just like internal personal privacy. And in the culture of the workplace, 9 times out of 10, not always Karens, people come to respect that and will very rarely interfere with someone's deep work at their desk, which directly leads into our next con, decreased productivity. Researchers from the University of California at Irvine found that employees in cubicles received 29% more interruptions than those in private offices, and added that those who were frequently interrupted report a 9% higher rates of exhaustion. And that's with cubicle partitions. Another survey found that one of the biggest losses of productive time during the day stemmed from interruptions by colleagues. Forbes concurs, and in one of their own articles writes that open office distractions decrease productivity anywhere from 15 to 28%. Our third con is a lack of privacy, both visual and audible. Researchers from Karlstad University found that the more workers that were gathered into a single office space, the less satisfied that they became, resulting in lower well-being. According to that same study, one of the top reasons for dissatisfaction was because these workers felt a lack of audible privacy. It was harder to have a good dialogue with their colleagues because everything they say would be overheard. I'm sure you can relate to this at some point. I don't even think we need a study to discuss visual privacy. You have none. You're out in the open. Everyone from your desk neighbor to your boss can literally watch everything you're doing, and if you're actually working, instead of searching for dinner recipes on Pinterest. So what if you believe that an open office plan is the right fit for your field of work, or if you're designing one for a client? Because there are still several instances where the open plan can be effective and the best solution for your project, if done properly. Here are some strategies to designing an open office plan that actually improves productivity and increases satisfaction for its users. Acoustics must be a high priority when designing an open office in order to enhance the ability to concentrate and decrease distractions. According to research by Gensler, offices that manage noise always outperform because they feel like they're not being overheard by their peers, and people are more easily able to focus on their work. According to research done by Harvard Business Review, employees who felt a greater sense of place identity perceived the physical features of the space differently, meaning they thought their office was a meaningful place to work, and they felt a sense of connection to the space. They were proud to be a part of the space when visitors arrived, and they felt the space was a reflection of them. For example, in one study, users who had a strong space identity experienced it as a more collaborative, social, flexible, energetic, and comfortable space, while those who didn't develop a place identity saw the space as noisy and cluttered. Workers who felt a greater personal connection to the space were also more engaged and enthusiastic about their work. They believed that communication with their colleagues and managers was of high quality, and so they sought it out more, and they felt a greater attachment to their organization. One way to develop a person's space identity is by allowing them to customize and personalize their space, and studies confirm this. This could be giving each desk a space to hang photos and artwork, or by making all of the furniture modular so that individual teams can rearrange it in a way that works best for them and their working style. So the key here is flexibility and customization. Another strategy that directly relates to creating space identity is inviting the users or employees to be a part of the design and planning process from the beginning of the project. Workers who were involved in the project or were given a voice to the design were more likely to respond that they enjoy and are satisfied with their new open office space. In contrast, users who were not considered at all and simply moved into a new space by force expressed dissatisfaction and even frustration, especially when moving from an office cubicle model to an open plan model. On that note, satisfaction often comes from the top down. Inviting employees in on the conversation and decision makes them feel like their opinions and their feelings matter and can further reduce the hierarchy. If members of leadership are leading this change and foregoing their private offices to join the masses out in the open, as well as expressing that they are excited about the change, then the workers are more likely to also be excited about it. If those same people are instead forcing everyone to an open plan out of their offices, yet maintaining their own cushy, spacious office, it sends a bad message. One of cutting costs and jamming more people in than there's room for. Finally, choice. This can be said especially in a post-COVID workplace where employees prefer a hybrid schedule that adds flexibility into their life and work-life balance. When people have the choice to work where they want and when they want, productivity increases. Not every person is created equal, therefore we don't all have the same way of working. Some people need secluded, private, and quiet spaces in order to feel their most productive, and others thrive on the energy of a bustling office or prefer to bring their laptop to a coffee shop. Designing a space that offers a variety of seating and working options like phone booths, open workstations, and reservable private offices support all of the different ways that people like to work. And this applies to meeting spaces as well. Although this may ultimately depend on the type of work being done and the specific needs of the company, many of the most successful spaces have a combination of traditional conference rooms and informal open meeting spaces to allow different teams to meet and gather in a way that feels authentic to their work. The open office has been and will continue to be debated, I'm sure, for many years to come. But hopefully with these strategies, you as a designer can continue to create spaces that are successful and actually invite people to come back into the office and overall enjoy being there, because that's why we're doing this, isn't it? If you like this video or if you learned something new, please leave me a comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sign up for our email newsletter to gain access to those free designer cheat sheets, and stay tuned for a new video. We post every Monday. So until next Monday, have a good week. See you next time.